Quilters Newsletter TV, the Quilters community, is brought to you by Husqvarna Viking, keeping the world sewing for over 140 years. Hi, and welcome to Quilters Newsletter TV, the Quilters community. I'm Mary Kate Karr-Petras, and I'm back with Erin Russek. Hi, Erin.
Hi.
This is the third of our three-part series on machine quilting in the real world. So in our first episode, we talked about setting up your space. In episode 2, Lori showed us some feed dog-driven techniques, and you are here to talk about free motion quilting.
Right. So I actually have a real quilt here that I'm working on. It's always good to see a real quilt.
It's lovely.
The first thing I want to talk about is, as you can see, I have this really giant meander here. I did not do that. I actually have a good friend who has a long arm, and I had her baste my quilt together. That way I didn't have to crawl around on the floor with safety pins and give myself a backache. And it was a really quick and easy way to get this basted so that it's all secure and I can just enjoy free motion quilting it. So that's the first thing I wanted to say about that. So don't be afraid to spend a little extra money. You're either going to spend it on your long armor or you're going to spend it at the chiropractor.
And then what do you do? How do you take these out?
Well, I will machine quilt an area, and then let's say I was doing the center area, I'm going to machine quilt an area, and I can I can either go over these and then gently pull them out, or I can take out the basting in that particular area and then machine quilt in it. Today,
So you would take it out before?
Right. You can do it either way. As long as you don't really yank on these, you're not going to dislodge your stitches too much.
Okay.
So that's one thing. Another thing I do to add extra stability, kind of like adding a backbone to the quilt, is I sometimes would stitch in the ditch around some of the piecing before launching into a whole lot of
large sections.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, like along here, just to give it an extra bit of stability to keep things stable while I was doing the free motion quilting in it, because you put a lot of time into your quilts, and so you want it to come out nice.
And is that something you find is more important with free motion than, I guess, than with straight line quilting, because you're just straight line quilting?
Right. Yeah, I find it helpful. It gives it a little structure to work with, and then when you're moving things around a lot, it's helpful. Another thing I do when I'm with a quilt like this is I would have a lot of leftover fabric and probably some leftover batting. So I would make a test sandwich with those things, the batting and the fabrics. That way I can test threads, and I could test tension, and I can get that all taken care of. Now, of course, that's small, and this is big.
Yeah.
Not huge, but big.
Still,
and so it will get you will be able to get all set up with those kinds of things before you launch into your quilt. So you'll have a good handle on your tension. You'll know what thread you're going to use. And you'll run into as few problems when you're actually quilting your quilt.
Because you're using the actual weight of fabric used in the quilt.
Not a piece of batik. There's not a piece of batik in this, so it would not be smart to set up your tension with batik if that's not what's in your quilt. So keep it as close to your actual, just use your scraps from making, everybody has scraps when they're done, so it's a good place to use them. You're usually sick of that fabric by then anyway. And then another thing I just wanted to point out is there are these quilting gloves, and they you can purchase them, and they have extra sticky bits on the fingers, and that helps some people manipulate the quilt under the machine. I need my hands to feel the quilt. That is what feels right to me, but these can be really, really helpful and save quilters.
There are quilters who swear by them.
Yeah.
And so it's a matter of your personal preference.
Right, and it's really a matter of playing with what's out there and finding what works for you. And so don't be afraid to try things. None of these things are super expensive. A little pair of gloves, or trying different threads. It's not it's not like you're buying a whole new sewing machine.
True.
You can do a lot of little things to optimize your existing sewing machine and make it really fun for you without a gigantic investment, and have a lot of fun doing it.
Because then you would end up doing your own quilting, which is what a
Save
lot of
you
people
some
enjoy.
money.
Would save money, and which a lot of people enjoy, and it would be an enjoyable process too. So
Right.
it makes sense.
Right, right. So I'm going to demonstrate a little bit how I would get started with a quilt like this for machine quilting.
Now you still set up your space at home with as many tables around you as possible.
Right.
Even not. This is what, maybe
50 by 50. So it's not huge. I would have it on a table where it's really supported. You're sitting here today, so I can rely on you to balance some of the quilt. But if you weren't here, I would have maybe an ironing board here to support that. Like we said in earlier episodes, you really want to avoid a situation where your quilt is falling off a table or a surface, because that's going to yank it. It's going to make it really hard to move, and it's going to just give you lots of neck and back issues as well. So I try to keep everything and then it'll move. You'll see when I'm free motion quilting it that you really want mobility under the needle.
Yes, yes.
So, because you're in free motion quilting, the movement of your hands and how fast you move the needle, that is what creates your stitch length. And so you need that. You don't want to be stitch, 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 and then have like a giant 1-inch long stitch. No. You know, which happens, and then you have to take it out, and it's not a big deal. Taking it out is not a bad thing. You know, don't freak out if you have to do that.
But you just feel like, oh, I've got this, I was doing so well, and so then, do you take it all out at that time?
I usually take out until the part that bugs me.
Oh, okay.
You know, just if it bugs you.
Well, then how do you fix that break in the thread then? I mean, do you just backstitch over that area?
Yeah, I mean, if your goal is for it to be in a show, then you need to take care of your stops and starts. So really obvious stops and starts are not pretty, and the judges will find those.
Yes, they will.
So if that's your goal, then you will want to give yourself a nice long thread tail to start, do your stitching, give yourself a nice long thread tail to finish, knot and bury your threads. So if you're doing that and you break your thread or you have a mess up, then you do have to take out enough of your free motion quilting in order to knot it and bury it. If you're just doing something fun or a wall hanging and you're not going to put it in a show, then the obvious stops and starts, no one's going to walk into your house, look at your quilt and go, look at that.
Right.
No one will do that.
Right.
So then you don't really need to be as fussy.
Okay. So then you would just sort of maybe backstitch over that area.
Yeah, just take a few really close stitch right where you start again and call it good.
Sounds good to me.
All right, so one of the things that people most ask about with this is how do I get my quilt in there? So I'm going to show you. Some people roll. I kind of pleat it like this.
And Lori rolls.
Lori rolls.
But she said that's not everybody's choice.
Yeah, and you have to find what works for you. And when I'm quilting a quilt like this, I'll start in the center. But Lori will start at the center of the top and just stitch down when she's doing her walking foot driven one. I'll start in the center of everything and then just work out from there because it's free motion, so you don't really need to care what direction this machine wants to sew in because you're telling it what to do. So anyway, one thing that I find is specific to me is I like to hold on to this much of the quilt with my hand. Now, some people find that hard and they just want to hold their hands like that. I really need, it's like a handle for me, I really need it. Okay. So for that matter, I don't do, the largest I've ever done is a twin size because that's a lot to hold. And after that, I really think about how to do it. So one of the first things you're going to want to do with free motion quilting is you're going to want to bring your thread up. So you needle down, needle up, lift your presser foot, and that should have snagged your bobbin thread. And you can see here, now I've brought my bobbin thread up. And I like to wrap the thread around my fingers. And
if I could just interject really quick, if you're sewing on an older machine that doesn't have that bring the bobbin thread up, you might have to actually go in and pull it up. That's something I had to learn, why isn't my thread just because I'm on an older machine that doesn't have that, and I have to actually just
get in there,
pull it up, and
Right. So you want to have both threads on the top when you start. Now, if you were doing an heirloom or machine quilting for something in a show, you would just start your free motion pattern. For starting out, you just want to take a few real quick stitches kind of close together. Okay, so I've taken some close together stitches and I'm a little tangled here, so I'll just get that away from my finger. And so now I'm just going to go, and that's another thing I wanted to say. For these filler patterns that go in free motion quilting, you can practice drawing. If you practice just drawing with a pen and a piece of paper, perfect. It gives you the muscle memory. It gives you where you want to know, where you want to go, how to do it. It's a really good way. So, you know, I doodle a lot. If people have seen my calendar at work, it's covered in doodles. So I do that a lot. I find it relaxing too. And so that's how I come up with various things. And people like stipple is a really popular thing that people do in quilts. I can't stipple to save my life. It's for some reason there's a rhythm or something to it that I find hard. But the one thing that I do that's like a stipple is kind of like it's been called a paisley, and it's 3 loops, and I find I can get into a real rhythm with it, and then I can just do it. And so that's what I'm going to do here. This is a really basic.
Sometimes people feel like, oh, I have to master the stipple or the meander before I can move on to something more complex.
No, and I think the stipple and the meander are way harder than some of these other patterns.
Thank you for saying that.
Way harder. So for doing this, I'm controlling my stitch length. So basically you just want to finish up free motion quilting your areas and trim off, and it's a really good thing to just practice what you're going to do, and then have a lot of fun doing it.
And with practicing, you make, how big a test quilts might you make?
Yeah, I think it's just a fun thing to make, like maybe a really big block, like a large size block. Maybe put some borders on it and just practice and have a lot of fun.
Okay.
So.
Thanks so much, Erin, for showing us these tips, and we hope that you found something interesting and helpful in all of this and seeing kind of some of the real world issues that come up when you're trying to wrestle a real sized quilt through your machine. Thanks so much for joining us. We look forward to seeing you next time. Take care. Bye-bye.
Quilters Newsletter TV, the Quilters community, is brought to you by Husqvarna Viking, keeping the world sewing for over 140 years.